Alright folks, we're back getting ready to prepare the pork butt. This was in a cryovac pack. I bought it at Sam's, and it's 18 pounds and a couple ounces. Now when you open up the pack, it really comes in two separate chunks of meat. This is one side. You'll see the bone right in here. That's the shoulder bone where from the pig itself. There's a little bit of a fat cap here, but I generally do not trim my pork butts unless it's a real thick fat cap. This one isn't too bad, and I always have the fat cap facing down on the grill itself. And here's the other side of the pork butt and the other part of that shoulder bone, which is right here again. And so these are about equal weight. They're probably both about 9 pounds. They've got a pretty level layer of a fat layer on the bottom of the pork butt, pork shoulder. What I usually do is after I get them out of the cryovac, I'll go ahead and give them a good rinsing under the tap water, and then I get a rimmed baking sheet here, and I want it rimmed because I'm going to inject 32 ounces of water along with my rub. I've dissolved that, and I'm going to inject that. And as you inject, if you've ever injected meat before, as you inject, some of it will seep out, and you want to have a rimmed baking pan there so you reduce your mess. For my injector, I just have a standard meat injection, and what I found handy is that there is a kind of a rubber or plastic O-ring that is along the side of the plunger here, and if you coat that first, just the O-ring, with some olive oil, it really lubricates it and allows the plunger to go in and deeper through the tube here to be able to push out your injection. And if you don't use it, sometimes it'll get stuck in the middle and you'll press, and I've done this before. I've bent the end of my injector here, but this one has seen a lot of injections into chicken and beef and pork, and I've bent it a few times, but fortunately when I bent it back, it hasn't snapped off yet. One of the next things I'll probably get for my barbecue cabinet is another injector. So what I've already done, I've taken 32 ounces of water and I've mixed it in with a 1/4 cup of my rub and dissolved it, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to inject the substance here, the water and the rub, into the various areas of the butt itself. Now when you go right down here, right adjacent to where the bone is, you're going to run into the bone, and as you begin to depress your plunger, you're going to pull it out slowly, and then you're going to go down, and you'll probably go for probably 3/4 of this one side, and you'll hit the bone. Now I just went in and I didn't hit the bone, so I'll be able to go most of the way down into the butt, and I'll continue to inject as I slowly pull it out. That way I'm getting the injection throughout the tissues of the meat and the muscle, so and the whole purpose of injecting, folks, is just to try and keep your meat moist during the long cook. And I've cooked, of course, I've smoked pork butts and brisket without injections, and they're good, but for my purposes, I just find it really helps retain the moisture in the meat if you do inject. Some folks use apple juice. They'll mix apple juice. Some folks have mixed wine with their rub, give it a little sweet, tangy flavor. I've done apple juice before, and apple juice is nice in pork, but for purposes of this smoke, I'm just doing water. And it probably takes about 6 or 7 different points of injection in a pork butt before you need to refill your injector, which I just did. And then we'll just keep injecting. The injection process itself is relatively simple. Now, if you're doing a brisket, if you saw the last video I did on the brisket is just a real tough piece of meat. The USDA classifies all the muscles in the cow. There's 49 of them, going from the highest being, or the lowest number 1 being the most tender, which of course is your filet and your filet mignon and the tenderloin area of the beef, and all the way down to 49, which is the toughest muscle in the cow, and brisket is number 48. So when I'm injecting a brisket, it's going to, it's a little harder to get the injection tip in Of course, a brisket is a much thinner piece of meat than what a pork butt and a pork shoulder is. And as you see, this injection process really doesn't take very long. When I get over here to the side, I like to angle my needle in so that I can get a little better fluid presentation into the interior and the side of the meat. I don't have a bone here on this side, so I don't have to worry about running into the bone and preventing it from getting deeper. I'll go ahead and inject the sides of both of these pork butts, and then I'm going to give a liberal sprinkling of my rub, and then after that I will coat it with, I'm probably going to use about 1.5 pounds of bacon, 3/4 pound on the one butt, and then 3/4 on the other. For those of you that are wondering, I've made a lot of references to the pork butt. This doesn't come from the hind end of the pork at all. It's actually the chest and the shoulder of the pig. And the name actually originated back in the New England times when the folks there, particularly in the Massachusetts and New England area, wanted to have their own nomenclature for a piece of meat, and so they started calling them Boston butts. So sometimes you'll see them referred to on some of the other YouTube videos as Boston butts. Sometimes you'll hear them referred to as pork butts or just butts and shoulders. If you watch pitmasters on the cable, they always call them just the butts. I'm using a metal pan here, a mixing pan, and one of the things, it's got a flat bottom fortunately, but this is the same pan I always use when I do my injections for any meat, chicken, brisket, or pork. And one of the things I've learned the hard way is when I do go back into the mixing bowl to get some more of my injection, I have to be very careful where I put the tip of my needle, because I've bent it more times than I can remember. So it took us probably about 4 minutes here to fully inject this particular side of the pork butt and pork shoulder. And now I've got it set up. I just kind of a habit for me. I've got the bone here on this one. I've got the bone here on this one. So I try and keep them the same way as I'm going through, so that I remember where the shoulder bone itself is, and that'll tell me that I'm not going to be able to go so far into the tissue of the meat when I do my injections. And I'm going to start this one off, instead of starting on the top. I don't have any reason for this, this is just how I happen to do it tonight. I'm going to inject the sides first, and by the time we get done, I've got 32 ounces of water here that I started with, and I'm probably going to end up with injecting about 29 to 30 ounces total into both of these pork butts, which means I'm going to have about 14.5 to 15 ounces of fluids in each of these pieces of meat. Now, the real value for that is, as you're doing a long cook, like I'm going to be doing overnight tonight with these pork butt and pork shoulder, it has a tendency to dry it out. You try your best to maintain the temperature, but there's going to be a time when, as the tissue and the meat and the muscles break down during the course of the cook, and your internal temperature begins to rise, that's going to adversely affect the moisture level in the meat itself. And so that's why this injection really has a tendency to offset that. If anything, it may even delay the completion of the cook a little bit. But I just from my experience, I would much rather take an extra 1.5 hours or 2 hours to get my internal temperature up to my target for the butt, and be able to tear it up with my bear claws for the shredded pork, or sliced pork rather, for the pork sandwiches, and have it moist than have it dry. And actually, if you try to do apple juice with this, it'll develop a real sweet taste just because of the apple. And apple is a good thing to add when you're doing pork. I've done apple juice, I've done water. Never did the wine, never did the beer. I know some of the YouTube folks that are doing videos have done every conceivable liquid known to mankind that I've seen. A lot of folks do the beer, but I just try and keep it simple, and I do the water or the apple juice. I won't use any apple juice in this during the cook. I won't even spritz it with any apple juice during the cook. I will just continue to monitor. I won't open the lid maybe more than twice during all the hours that it will be cooking. I will open the door if my Maverick tells me that my temperature on the grill temperature is reducing, which just means I need to add some more charcoal or some more wood. The wood you use in the smoke itself, and again I'm using hickory and cherry for this smoke, is really what's going to help early in the stages. Don't think that if you put some wood in late in your cook or midway through, it really is not going to have any impact on your development of the bark or the transfer of the taste and aroma of the smoke into the meat itself. That's always early in the cook stage itself. However, another trick that I've found on a long smoke like this one is that sometimes it'll be hard to maintain your temperature above 225, and if it drops down, if my alarm goes off and my grill level temperature is dropped down to say 195, if I want to spike it up real quick, I'll throw in some wood chunks. Once those wood chunks ignite, I don't know if you can see this here, but as I'm injecting, the level of the meat is starting to kind of almost build like it has an edema, which of course it does because I'm injecting fluid into it. But I'm all but done here injecting, but back to the use of the wood late in the cook. If you really want to get a quick increase in your temperature, that's when I've used the wood. It won't help at all on the development of the bark. It won't help at all with regards to the transfer of some of the aroma and taste of the smoke into the meat. I don't know if you want to see how this injector works, but as I inject it, I just got out of it here, but I'll just take a little bit here and show you. I got an injector site, a hole on each side of this needle. Last time I tried to do this, I sprayed myself, so let's see if I can do it with it. So you see where it kind of goes, and I like to also put a little bit of the injection solution on the top surface of the meat, and the reason I do that is that will really help in the development of allowing the rub that I'm going to put on here to be adhere. The other trick, and you've heard probably different things, but the other trick that you'll find handy too with regard to keeping your rub on the meat so it doesn't fall off is regular yellow mustard. Mayonnaise works, mustard works. Never use ketchup. I don't like mayonnaise. I like the taste that you get, the little tangy taste with the mustard. So what I do is I just spread, put a pretty liberal layer of mustard here on the top and on the sides. Now that's going to blend in with the injection solution that you saw me spray on the top. And if you could see the inside of this cookie sheet, you'll see why I like to use one that has rims on the side. And after I've done that, I'm going to take my left hand, because I'm right-handed and I want to use my right hand to be able to put the rub on, and I just kind of spread the mustard all the way around, and the mustard adds really a little bit of taste, but you wouldn't notice it. Really the whole function of me putting the mustard on is to be able to take my rub here and go ahead and sprinkle it on. And I put a real liberal dose, particularly on a pork butt. I put a real liberal dose of the rub on the butt itself, and on the sides sometimes I got to pick it up on the side, just kind of angle it. And this is what will really help develop the bark. When you'll notice when we get done with this cook in about 27 to 29 hours, you're going to notice a real dark bark here. I will not put any rub on the bottom. If you remember when I showed you that was the fat cap. And I won't put any rub there because with the fat layer there, it's really not going to get into the meat itself. The rub won't. And so I'll go ahead and just on the pork itself, I'll just go ahead and put sometimes I got to get it on my fingers here, on my palm of my hand, go along the sides, particularly where that bone is, because sometimes there's an indentation into the meat. And that's what I have here. I've got a little indentation on both sides of the meat where the bone is. And you don't have to cover everything, of course, but I like to be pretty liberal. And the only other thing that I'm going to do here that you won't see when I finish this part of the video is I'm going to take those slices of bacon, and I'm going to have probably 3/4 of a pound of sliced bacon on the top. I don't toothpick it in. I don't do anything with it. I just lay it over the top. It will lay over the sides of the pork butt itself. I'm going to take this now after I put the bacon on it on each one. I'm going to take it, I'm going to wrap it, I'm going to put it in the refrigerator. It'll stay in the refrigerator for probably about 3 hours, and then I'll fire up the charcoal starter that I showed you earlier and get these on the grill. I'm shooting for somewhere between 11 and midnight to get those on the grill. I'm going to monitor the temperature with my Maverick. For those of you that haven't seen the Maverick, I've got two, and I'm going to, this is the receiver where I can take it anywhere in my house, on the front yard, go out and get the paper, and it'll give the grill level temperature and it'll give the internal temperature of the meat. I mentioned earlier about the probes, and this is the probe that I use for the internal temperature of the meat. They come with about 3-foot long cords, which I find to be very perfect. This is the probe that goes into the internal portion of the pork butt, so it'll give me the constant reading of the internal temperature. And then this is the temperature probe for the level of the grill. Comes with an attachment for the grill. It goes in, there's 2 holes there, and then this thing, this clip will clip on 2 portions of the grill. I've modified my Maverick so that I've drilled 2 holes on the middle and the top parts, and particularly when I use both of my grill grates in the cook, and that way I can run, I've got 2 Mavericks, I can run both my leads out to the transmitters, and they'll send out the receiver, send out the temperatures to the receiver. And this is just the transmitter itself. One of the temperature probes plugs into this port here. The other temperature probe plugs into this port. Takes about 30 seconds for the transmitter and the receiver to sync up, and then I'll be able to monitor my temperature throughout the cook. I start really paying attention when I get to about 10 degrees of my target level for the internal temperature, and then I might cheat a little and look and see how it's going. But that's it for now. I'll come back and show you how I'm going to get it set up for the grill. Be dark, but I'll have the light on, and we're fixing to finish this up sometime tomorrow, and show you the finished product too. So from Omaha, Nebraska, this is Denny Lee of Res Ipsa Omaha Barbecue. Don't forget, email your questions to denny@leelawoffice.com. I introduced you earlier to Minnie the pit puppy. She's sacked out way past her bedtime. She's had a real tough day because she went to the spa. I'll see you in a bit.